First of all, thank you for coming, people. It's lovely to see you. Well, the work that I'm doing here is from, a lot of it is experiences of where I lived in Northern Ireland. I was born in Newtonards in County Down and lived and grew up by the town of Bangor by the sea. And then for my marriage, I went to Aberystwyth University, met my husband, we drifted apart a bit, then got together again. And for some years I worked as an artist for exhibition and commission. Then I started having problems with my muscles, and I couldn't hold my arms out to paint for any length of time, I couldn't write for any length of time, and I was studying music, learning piano. But then I started falling off the notes and things happening, and I thought, what's the matter? And I was in a babysitting circle, my son and daughter were just very small at the time, and a girl was embroidering, and I thought, oh, there's an idea. And I started to stitch, and I haven't looked back. That was the one thing I could do at the time, was put a needle in and out of material. And my grandfather actually had been an embroidery designer for Belfast linens, so it was sort of in the family. But actually I did fine art at Aberystwyth and Italian, and three of us wanted to put stitch into our work. But the professor at the time said, oh, that's women's stuff. No, that's not fine art, girls, you know. So we thought, oh dear, better not. But now that it has changed and people are beginning to accept stitch, and why not? You can use stitch like you would use a brush stroke, or it's very like a stroke of a pen, and you build up your images with the fine lines. Fabrics behind, I silk paint fabrics, and then I layer these up, and that's how I do the work, and I really enjoy doing it. And I think we have a different approach to stitched work as oil paintings in the gallery or watercolours, because we're all wearing fabric. It's put on us when we're born, we wear it all our lives, we're wrapped in it when we die. So I think we have a different approach to a fabric as we would have to a painted picture, so you get a different reception, and I think that's important as well. And this work was really, it's all for the Wilfred Owen, The War and the Peace. And I'm actually doing that because my PhD is looking into the symbiotic relationship between sound and word and stitch. And I'm using my experience of troubles, partly because I was exploring what stitch is, what fabric is, and I put a linen thread into a taut piece of calico and pulled it through. And when we augmented that in the computer, it sounded like the aftermath of an explosion, and I thought, my goodness, it took me back to the streets of Belfast. So that started me off on this theme of bringing out these stories, these expressions in stitch. I had written some poetry before about that time, but not brought it out in the visual art. And the other problem is, in our world, we still have conflict. So it seemed something that one should still do. And people still are affected by the Troubles. There are still investigations going on. And people who have lost others, you don't get over that, really, in your lifetime. You come to terms with it, but you don't really get over it. And this first poem that I'm going to read is about what it feels like after an explosion. There's a piece here, after, in the gallery, and that's showing some of the smoke. And that's one of my most abiding memories of Belfast, is the smoke that would rise above the city with these explosions that happened almost daily. And then the silence after an explosion. This is after. No birds sing, scattered, torn, confetti-like bodies fall, bomb blasts, song of sparrow and screech of gull, into silence. Painful, in the shocked air, flicker of eyelid touching cheek is loudly palpable. Siren far off keens its wail of belated anguish, after the event, the desperate salvation. Mouths dry, struggle to form words, dry eyes, dry hands, suspended everything, and no birds sing. But people did want to bring about a peace, and in the 1990s there was talk of it. It did take some time. But I wrote this poem called Lagan 1995 whenever people were trying to work out a peace process. And for those who don't know Belfast, the River Lagan flows through the city and out into the loch. So this is Lagan 1995. Red River, Blood River, flotsam of the dead river, Creep around ships in harbour, pull yourself to the mother sea. Water, salt bright as tears. Pax vobiscum in the silver chalice. Is this really the end to fear? Spewed over hate-erupted fires, a new bridge is slung over your cold meandering. Can peace so easily close the screaming lips of gangrenous jealousy, mistrust? Broken small child weariness says it should. Ubi caritas et amor says it must. Well, sometime later, the peace process was brought about, and that was so wonderful that happened. It seemed impossible in Ireland at one stage. And I then wrote another poem. And this one was written after the peace process was broken. It was in 2009. There were shootings. And it had been peaceful. This hadn't happened for a while. And it was a tragic event. And people came out in the city to hold candles in the candlelit vigil by City Hall. People from all over to say we must not do this. And there is mention in this of one of the explosions that had happened at the bus station. I was getting my way home on the train, which was overladen because of the problems with the bus. People had been killed. We pulled out very, very slowly from the station, and there was just empty ground beside us, and soldiers and police were walking across with black bin bags and picking up little bits. Some of it was people, because after the explosion that had happened. And on that train, it was as if even the air was painful. And I wanted just to mention colours, because you'll notice a lot. I've got reds, I've got blacks, I've got greys. Black of burnt out buildings, red of blood, red of fire. And red, metaphorically for me, it's the anger that kept the two sides warring with one another until we could find some peace. But this is Belfast, Lagan Revisited. It was black and red then, shadows darker than coal. Blood-bright puddles reflect flames shooting high, colour the night sky. Walk quickly, but don't fall over rubble, scattered, littering pavements. If you cry out, who will come? No one in these bleak back streets. Houses shrouded, muffled, not a single lit window. Soundless as forgotten stage props. In the city centre, hoses snake, firemen shout, groups of soldiers and police, and all the main roads barred. Keep walking, alone in the emptiness. No street lights and the black river flowing. That was then. Now orchestras play where nearby carnage once left silence on the train. Palpable, as if the air itself were in pain, and no one spoke. But that was then. Now shops open late, and libraries and art centres appear, and people smile. Lagan salt bright as sun, not tears. Pax vobiscum, chalice held out to all. A tragic breaking, dreadful reliving of fear, dry bile in the mouth. But the desire for peace is stronger than hatred's sickening awakening. Peace tasted is not so easily overcome. Darkness of a sombre night, grasped in many hands, quiet faces shine in bright quiver of candlelight. Tender brushstrokes of sorrow. Peace retains a hold, is held, is held. And the next poem I read is for me one of the most painful things, because it seems a terrible thing to harm children. And in conflict, that happens, it can happen so often. One of the things I did in Belfast was worked for a little while as a nurse. That isn't my cape, but it is a nurse's cape, and it was gifted to me. I was over visiting again some years later. I had to leave because I hadn't enough resistance to infection. But that is actually a cape worn by a nurse in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast. And it's precious to me, and I'm embroidering my thoughts and feelings around it. I want to say it's compassion, it's healing, because we have compassion in our world, and we so need it. I was nursing once a little baby, tiny little boy. He hadn't any hope to live. It was palliative. We had to suck his little lungs out every 15 minutes so he could breathe, but he fought for his life. And one day, there was a dreadful commotion in the ward. I thought, what's going on? People running. A 6-year-old child had been shot through the head on the Falls Road, just outside. I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but it was because of that conflict and warring that had happened to her. I don't know if she lived or died, but that little child I nursed knew how precious life was. He might have known nothing else, but he fought for it. And someone was just blowing a child's life away. This is fragments. People morphing in and out of smoke like clouds, hides mangled bodies. As 9-year-olds to die, at 35, at 68, wandering, dazed, shirtless, shoeless. He was right out of it. Massive explosion just removed her from this earth. We were screaming and panicking, screaming but deaf and bones slammed tight, couldn't hear anything. No sound. As 9-year-olds to die? Devastation, just devastation. Heroes were police and ambulance crews, came to help the dead and dying, not knowing if another device would remove them from this earth. As 9-year-olds to die? He was running, shouting, spotted the thing in the back of the car, warn everyone, bomb! In his teens, caught full force of the blast. He was blew to pieces. As 9-year-olds to die. Looking for her children, she drew level with the car. Bomb! Removed her from this earth. As 9-year-olds to die. No sound, not a bird or anything. He planted the bomb, went to the pub, ordered a whiskey. She was lying there, her body full of hacks, skull of man or woman embedded in the railings. As 9-year-olds, 9-year-olds, as 9-year-olds to die. But of course, people did survive. Lots of us did. I did. My father did. That's his portrait there. That's him as a young man in the RAF during the Second World War. And he lived through the conflicts as well. But it made him terribly sad when the troubles were going on. We had divisions in our family. Northerners didn't want to go south. Our southern relations didn't want to come north. It was the fear of the times, the tensions of it all. And my dad said to me one day, Eileen, I fought for these people, and they're killing us. Unfortunately, he died before the peace process. He would so have loved to see it. But he lived to see my marriage. He lived to know my daughter Juliet, my son Ed, which was a wonderful thing. And this poem I wrote after he did die. He was disabled out of the Air Force. He had a terrible illness, which he suffered from all of his life. And I wrote this poem for him after he had died. Gift for my father. Beyond the window, wan grey sky seeps onto rooftops. Clothesline drips the rain of autumn. Within the room I sit, still, close my eyes, and follow strings of violins, sing sounds of Barb's adagio. Silk beneath sparrows' pipe-trilled pizzicato. Crescendo swell, fill flowingly my waiting body. At short pauses my breath stops, then spends itself in wavering exhalations while my knotted stomach trembles. Moist, my eyes look back at you. Last touch, although I didn't know it then, of silvered hairs of head, warm with pulse of life still throbbing through. Seated on the bed, You held out gifts for grandchildren you loved so much, taught croquet on the fresh-cut lawn. In the hospital you said, my daughter is an artist. Only after death, I knew, was told, and cannot tell you how much this means to me. Dream of a portal into death. You are lying, wrapped in coloured fragments of my creating, conversation in a golden room, whirling, swirling, drifting, floating. The music carries me, gently enfolded in its embrace. I remember how you could not bear to listen to classical music because it moved you too much. And I cannot bear not to listen, in case without it, my soul might suffocate within the bounds of its own silence. And my soul will not stay silent. Now my heart, one with the rung sounds, runs up octaves, takes breath and cries in joy, soars, screams, blazes in an ecstasy of love and pain. Pinioned, my spirit clasps at mystery, pure, sublime, unspeakable. Sighing, I descend from the cross, touch echo of angels' wings, and I'm filled and spent. And I survived as well, of course. There were several things, but one particular occasion, I completely believed myself to be dead. I graduated from Aberystwyth. I was back in Belfast and at Queen's University looking up careers. I was alone in this room. No one knew I was there. And all of a sudden, I didn't hear the bomb, but I felt the push in the small of my back. And the room seemed to be dissolving, all the shells melting like jellies. And I thought, maybe it was my final thought, I thought, what art? I thought, are these molecules actually jumping apart or only appearing to jump apart? Which was what the futurists thought about, so that was it. Then I went into the blackness. And I don't know how long I was there for, but the blackness, when I came to into something, it was a white light. I had no sensation of bodily presence, absolutely nothing. It's very hard to explain because I wasn't floating or drifting. I just was pure thought in a white light. I don't know how long I was there for, but I thought, wow, I've just died. Luckily, I didn't think the rotters had just killed me. I just, wow, I've gone into death. This is amazing. And I thought, well, who will I meet now? And what will become? What will happen? I was still in this lovely white light, very peaceful like milk, but nobody there. And then I saw little gold sparkles, and I thought, oh, how pretty. I always hoped it would be pretty. They're like dust motes in the sun. And I thought, hang on a minute, it is dust motes in the sun. I'm alive. And it was like two sides of a coin, life, death. And there I was. But it was the tops of the windows I was aware of first. And then gradually I thought, right, I've got some sort of body, still couldn't feel it. So I thought, right, if I have a right arm, move. And I thought, oh yes, right arm, fingers, 5 fingers, right. If I've got a left arm, and I felt my shoulder, there's a left somewhere there, and I wouldn't lift it, move. And it took some time. Then I thought, oh no, worst moments, I've lost my legs, eek. And I felt down. There's a leg there. No blood, I'm in one piece, which was amazing. And what had happened was I'd been pushed forward, and I think I'd hit my head in the shells, but in ricochet I finished feet back against the wall, and I hit the back of my head, so that's why I was knocked out for a while. But here I am, to tell more little stories. And then I wrote this next poem, sometime after that, and it's for the others. I survived. In the white light, I didn't meet the others then, those who had gone on that day, or on other days, cruelly catapulted from frame of bone and tissue. Ingestion in the mother's womb, the first breath, cries, smiles, growing, running, laughing, discovering, all the sing-song days of life, bloodily torn apart, ripped and shredded into silence. No, I didn't see the others then, nor those who died of grief and consummate sorrow. I survived, but I hear their cries sorrowing in my head, so I stitch paths of remembrance, red veining in lines of silk and cotton, blood red threads, that are life and death and hope and grief and resurrection. And one of the other pieces that I made, it's beside you on the wall there, is Continuum. Because I was thinking about, and we've got Remembrance Sunday coming up very soon now, but we've had the First World War, which people had so hoped would be the war to end all wars. And then we had gone into the Second World War, we've had the Troubles, and there's been Korea, Vietnam, now the terrible, terrible problems in the Yemen. People want peace, we do want it. And it is just finding our way through how we can help people to live with respect for one another and love rather than the hate. And this poem, Continuum, there's a little film here, if anyone who hasn't seen it or would like to, and there's the music. I had written music after my dad had died. It's called Come Stay, a melody. And my son, who's here today, harmonised it for choir, and we recorded it, and then had my work behind it, because at first I was going to make an installation with the music, then I thought, it's for this, it's for the conflict, for the peace, because it was inspired by Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane before going into death. How so many people now wait to hear about loved ones who come back or sadly don't come back. And this piece is actually on the film as well, but I'll read it for you now. It's Continuum. Red of blood soaks into blanket, while clamour of rescue wails on. Passer-by passes on, hold and stunned victim, while still the children cry. And why do we allow such pain? Soldier and airman look through years, and what do the poppies mean? More fears, more tears. Killers, silent, secret, hidden ghosts walk until a moment of atrocity. But compassion, gold and legacy of sorrowing humanity, comforts broken lives worn out by grief, incertitude. Blaze of love engulfs deeper darkness of evil's clawing grasp, flows unwavering light through healing hands, inexhaustible into eternity. And I wrote this next poem partly because of fears of Brexit, because there has been, it's dreadful for us all, it's dreadful, isn't it? We were on holiday in France, and I was saying to the lovely people who ran the sheet, we don't want Brexit, we really don't. But, and what will happen in Ireland frightens me, because there's been a degree of peace there, which is wonderful. You can back backwards and forwards across the border, and people are fine with it. But if that has to shut down, these sides could, there already actually have been more tensions, more punishment shootings, which is just terrible. And I wrote this poem thinking about that situation. It's called Recurrence. I draw words down with every thread, like birdsong, punched out of the dark. Light of silk and cotton plays on virgin linen. Sparks candle flame and burning heat. Not soft as skin petals smoothed between fingers, but spatter of air-cracked moment. History's stranglehold in the now but then thinking. Diffusing and diffusing and diffusing. Walk back further and further. Petrol tanker holds its load of fickle fuel. City centre retains stone on stone. Racing blood slows, pulses normal rhythm. Surely not again mangled flesh sorrowed on news headlines, torn apart to sate what God-forsaken desire knock on the door and a nation's grieving. And for what? For what? I visited Belfast a couple of years ago when I was given the kit, and I took photographs of walls, because you get a lot of this in Ireland. You get gable walls painted with one side as this, one side as the other, and actually peace walls as well, saying we must get the hope, we must get the peace to it. And it seems almost strange to me that tourists go down the Falls Road and photograph it. I suppose it's a bit like, after the war you get the comedies, hello, hello, and various things. You can do that after a time, but when you look at it where you knew what went on and the pain of it, it does seem an odd situation. But I know it's life and it's part of the process of going on. And this one is Walls. He stares out at you in full colour, brown of a blanket draped round his vigorous shoulders, carries statement on wall on the Falls Road. Forceful, blatant, challenging as faces of the hunger strikers, preserved in roundels of paint. You are entering the Gaelic Quarter. In East Belfast, Titanic workers in slender bronze stride out before they confront you. Gunmen on the wall, black on white, larger than life, brandishing weapons in battle stance in as yet undying cause. Remember 1973. Red Hound of Ulster, legend written out in full, where Union Jacks fly birthright to Britishness and poppies commemorate the dead. While in the west, wind lifts green, white and gold of the tricolour fluttering from pubs, and figure of young man, dressed for 1916, speaks not of the Somme, but of the Easter Rising. Bolyachachir, Dublin's fair city, in global terms, short distance down the road, where now are the police and army patrols, Land Rovers, armoured cars, consigned to histories of the bloodied past. But will the hope, brushed in paint, coloured tiles, pieced together in mosaics, let forgiveness write new legends, while still the punishment shootings happen, and marchers wear their uniforms with pride? In Belfast, speak to someone only met, and what history of self do you reveal? And what conceal? For fear of offence, or souring friendship just begun, or fear itself? And do the young still feel burden of these uncertainties, constraints? How long might they continue until a true equality for all might be achieved? Liberté, égalité, fraternité. Chorus for a world in which so many suffer fear. Beacon words that in this place call for sharing of a joint identity instead of schism of nationhood divided. Céad míle fáilte gobal fírste. Welcome to Belfast. Fáilte to the balls and the falls, and welcome to Nula with the hula. Beneath brittle bright sunlight, memory of darkened streets, where one night, car keys spirited away by unseen fingers, you grabbed your bags and fled. Spare keys turned in ignition, engine fired, and you escaped, flying fast over sleeping policemen, while in the anonymous houses, all knew, to watch the Walmadarl and my gentleman goodbye. Now hope burns bright as the high-vis jackets on police who patrol by City Hall, where crepe are on sale for all, and weapons are trained for a different battle on a worldwide stage with different players. The neat little town they call Belfast, framed by Cathal and the law, lives on. Could it be that one day, in some distant unseen future, even flags will fly with the same colours, and all can claim the histories they sing? It wasn't all dreadful in Ireland. It can be a generous place to live. My relatives were extremely generous. I'd go to my Auntie Ina, and there would be cakes and biscuits and shortbread and tea and coffee and all sorts. And when I was a child, one of my uncle and aunt came to live near us for a short time, and they had a big family. They'd been missionaries out in India and Pakistan. Very interesting life. And it was a farmhouse by the sea where they lived for a while. And this is a little poem that I wrote. Isla Till is the name of the farm, and it's for my cousin Margaret. You and Judy, leaning on the wooden panels of the half doors with their peeling paint. Green, deeper than British racing green, almost, hot in high sun's warmth. The two of you smiling your teenage youth and sisterly comeliness. Myself a child, running, laughing, rabbit hunting across the field with Danny, and Kevin sent to look for us. Years later with Kevin, father substitute, linking arms for the up the aisle stepping towards the altar in the impossibly high heels and long white flowing dress to the Queen of Sheba in the London church, to kneel beside Arthur and smiling, join hands in life. There you are, the two of you, tea's ready. And so it was. 2 families, the 10 of you begot by 2, and we sisters, only the 2 of us, revelling in the farmhouse closeness that held us all together. While the sun still lit stable doors across the yard, we gathered round the massive table on the red flagstones in the shadowy kitchen with the Belfast sink, walls lined with cupboards, to eat the tuna fish and cornflour and milk, Aunt Ethel's Canadianness on toast. Grandparents too, and one time Judy, sore with the jellyfish stings. The forever summer, up the hill, through the narrow lane, and edge of sea fields. Later, you all navy elegance, smart kitten heels, slim rolled up brolly, my beautiful grown-up cousin, before the New Zealand life. So many thoughts of you and conversations never had. The frozen 21ness and unimaginable over 70. The strangeness and lostness of it all. I did lose touch with Margaret for some years, but we spoke. It was strange with that poem. I woke up one morning, about 5 in the morning, thinking about Margaret, and I have to write this for her. And my cousin Kevin had given me her address, and I thought, really must get in touch. Later that day, I was told she had bile cancer and wasn't expected to make it even to the hospice. And I thought, oh no. And I sent off the poem, and I sent off an email to her, got it to her daughter. She not only made it to the hospice, she made it home before she died, and we talked, and I don't think it'll be the last time we speak. And that was by the sea, I was saying. I love the sea. I grew up by it, I studied by it, and it could even be fun in Ireland. I know dreadful things, but the sea was beautiful, and I always felt comfort by it. And this is Rockpool. I love the little rock pools. Eyes grew up to watch gull hover, silhouette solid against intense cobalt. Ancient upthrust oven, rock in the sun's heat, rough granite, wind breathes lazily across hopped, limpid, pimpled surface. I find it in a little dip, secretly sleeping. Slowly, lovingly, awkward fingers split, peering face in the small mirror, enter jewel chamber, touch silk and skin. Stickily waving tentacles whisk away, hide under shiny crimson dome. Pinprick of light glares accusingly. You have molested me in the green weed of my sanctuary. I withdraw my hand, stroll down onto soft sand. Unseen arms wave in private pleasure. And even in Belfast, you could find consolation within all what was going on. One other job I did was working in Belfast Central Library, and I was on the train on my way up to it one morning, and I saw a beautiful swan. This is a shape poem, actually. I don't know if you can see. I wrote it out to be looking like a swan. It was so lovely, I dedicate this poem to the swan. Belfast Swan. Sedge and bulrush fall away in succession, watery precursor of city's trickle. Wind-whipped loch and lilac-blue hills, a cloudless backdrop. Beyond street glass, brackish stretches of pool-splashed marshes hold a gleam of grace-filled form. Caught by the swan, I watch it creamily uncurl sinuous neck out from amber brownness. Regally gaze. Piece of tangled weed clings to orange beak. Proud pods of life, proud and ruffled, ripple sheen, water shiver, wind mirror. Cream gleaming on the ruffled water. Train come, train gone, but I still see the bright swan. And I do a lot of my work to music. And it has a cyclical rhythm really, because I will be stitching, and then I will think words, which lead back into stitch, and I will have my music, sometimes goes into silence, back into music. That's the sort of way that I work. And one day I had Sperminalium on by Thomas Tallis. I don't know if many of you know it, but it is these lovely voices, and they weave in and out of one another. And it reminded me a lot, in a way, of how I work. I layer things up, I weave things in and out. And one of my soundtracks here by Litany, it's by Street Violence, or by that one, I had voices reading my poem fragments that I'd read to you earlier on. And they're different voices, male and female, which I weaved in and out with the sound of the thread. And it said to me that that was the oral equivalent of the visual. And the words in this particular one then were inspired by Thomas Tallis particularly. So it is Sperminalium for Thomas Tallis. Polyphonic voices capture my soul, weaving through velvet tenors. High piping recalls range I used to have. Light chiffon sopranos drift above dark harmony bass. Feather notes penetrate as needle pierces soft, yielding paper and organza. Tactile colours speak their drama. Snip of scissors cuts and cuts. Thread passes through fineness of steely eye. Stitches grow, image builds, then cut and cut. Little deaths that sigh through thrimble and tremble of being's insistence. Spirit calls. Voice that is not a voice. Touch that is not a touch. Compassion agape confirms, lauds, promises everlasting unity of love. Gold that restores suffering of attacked flesh, that will become not this, but a changed thing, in requiem of glimpsed eternity. And the last poem that I'd like to do for you today is called Cormorant. And again, it takes me down to the beach. And interestingly, at one time, there was a bomb that went off in Bangor. Luckily enough at midnight, because, I say luckily, because my mother and myself were going to meet at 3 o'clock the next day in a little coffee shop where she worked part-time, just for coffee and then shop. This bomb went off prematurely. Now the owner of that shop, it was the 3rd time he'd been bombed out, and he never owned a business again. And my mum actually stopped working part-time after that. She'd enjoyed her little job, but that was too much for her, I think, and she thought, no, she won't do it anymore. But we were so lucky about that. But interestingly, we didn't hear that bomb go off. We lived a few miles outside Bangor in a village. But the next morning we smelt the gelignite on the air, so we thought something's happened nearby. But another time, we did hear a bomb go off, which we thought was Bangor, but it actually was the town of Carrickfergus, 8 miles across the loch. But over the water, the sound had carried, which is just fascinating how that sort of thing happens. But the beach is still a consolation for me, because the sea gives and takes, doesn't it? There's so tsunamis, all these things. But yet if we go down to the sea on a calm day, with the sun sparkling on the water and waves just trickling in, it calms the spirit, and I feel a spirituality there. And I love this bird called the cormorant, because as a child I used to watch them bobbing up. When I was a student in Aberystwyth, there they were in the sea, and now I live not far from the sea, and there they are again. So this is it. Cormorant. Feathers sleeked to skull, sharp toss of head reveals cormorant. Walking on beach, mirrored with rain, wet sand. Travels far, new sight of body, measures flight in water. Footprints dig deep, tide-pool patterns weave. Birthing point to length of life. Bare sand, swish of cold sharp grass, touch of skin wet hands. Wind blows from shore to sea, from sea to shore. Winds blow